Tell me about Dover Microsystems and putting security directly onto a chip.
Well, the general trend of trying to secure hardware has been this concept of maybe a RoboCop, where you're trying to surround your processor with a bunch of security software. Maybe ARM Trust Zone is a good example. You're wrapping around in cryptography, so you're encrypting and decrypting data that's stored and on the move. But the whole idea was to make this processor secure, make a Fort Knox out of the protection. The reality is, all software has bugs. It's just a reality of life, and bugs lead to the vulnerabilities. So adding software to secure hardware is just counterintuitive. It just doesn't work. You're just opening up more of the attack surface to hackers. Second is, as we've seen, with Meltdown Inspector and other things, there's hardware vulnerabilities that we never designed for security. Okay, we designed for test. We have DFT. We designed for manufacturing. We have DFM. I don't know anybody on the planet that's doing DFS, designed for security, but they should be. It's the same attitude. And so, how do we know the hardware is actually secure? Well, you don't. And that's how 14 years after Intel launches a processor, we find out, oh, now we have this problem, and what do we do about it? So the approach that Dover took was radically different. It was born out of a DARPA program. It was incubated at Draper Labs. And it said, the idea is we're going to provide a Sentry processor. So we're adding a second processor, think of it as a bodyguard or a sentry, whose only job is to make sure the host processor only executes valid instructions with valid data. And it's not hanging off a bus, it's not something as a monitor, it literally is integrated with the host processor. So let's take an ARM M7 microcontroller, for example. Our customer would pull that ARM M7 out and replace it with the ARM7 that has CoreGuard integrated. It's actually a hardware interlock.
Okay, so you're not actually making a separate chip. You're making IP that goes into a core.
We're enhancing the base core that you're using, whether it be an ARM or a RISC-V or a Tensilica, whatever that is. We've worked with that processor vendor and we've built a core-guarded version of that. So to the user, it's simply pull the other one out and stick this one in.
Okay.
And what this new one does is the Sentry, the CoreGuard processor, has a set of rules, micro-policies of, for example, a very simple case for safety would be a pacemaker. Pacemakers today have defib in there. They can fire off when they sense and save your life. But if you have a pulse and you fire that defib, it'll kill you. So a simple rule would be you can never fire the defib when there's a pulse. It's a very simple rule, but it's the only way to ensure that nobody could hack that processor and make that happen. There's an old South Homeland television episode on Showtime where the Russians assassinate the vice president by hacking his pacemaker. These are the kinds of rules that would take that off the attack surface of the hackers. So by having a separate processor, we can stop the host processor almost in the same cycle that they're executing. So we avoid any damage to the system.
What we're talking about here then is operational security, not necessarily data security.
Right.
Okay.
Right. What we're talking about is more related to functional safety, reliability, ownership, operation of the node.
Okay.
We build on cryptography. I try and explain to people. I talked at the RISC-V Summit a couple weeks ago. I was saying, security's not one thing. Okay, it's not just I go get this and now I'm done. You need to have a root of trust. You need to be able to say this piece of silicon is who I think it is. On top of that root of trust, you need to build authentication.
What I discovered in talking with various people, both users and vendors, that most of the attacks come from physical access to the hardware. So that sounds like this is about 67%. Whereas another 30% it's just human stupidity. It's giving up a password. It's getting a stolen encryption key.
Well, I run into some of the bigger companies that have a pretty good size and capable security group, you know, and inside of that group it'll be segmented to capabilities. I have my anti-tampering people, I have my network-based kinds of attacks, I have the kinds of glitch injections where I'm trying to force things to happen. There's people with electronic beam imaging that are, you know, will stick a signal in through an electron beam and then watch what happens, and they'll go, oh, there's the reset signal, oh, there's the clock, and they're basically plotting everything inside that chip. That's a very specific skill. Inside the same security group, you might have somebody that's all about cryptography, you know, and then now with quantum computing, we're starting to say all of these crypto techniques are going to get broke by quantum computing. If you go talk to Secure RF about their quantum resistant authentication. So security, even the organization, is quite diverse and broad in the requirements. So it doesn't surprise me that people would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tools, because there's such a wide requirement for those.
Well, let's go back to your product. There are lots of physical attacks that can occur. Like somebody could grab my phone while I'm having dinner with somebody. Go in a back room, use a heat gun to take it apart, flash the BIOS, snoop the DRAM, grab all that data, put it all back and get it back to me before I realize it's gone. Does your system protect against that?
Well, it depends what they're trying to get. I mean,
Well, they're trying to get my data.
If they're trying to get your data.
They want to access my bank account.
Sure. So then the Sentry would say that data would never be allowed to exit this data pins, or, I mean, you'd set up a rule that said what you're trying to do is illegal. Okay, you can't. That's not a valid transaction, because
what I'm saying is they've accessed my hardware. They've actually flashed the BIOS to change the operating system, change necessarily the parameters of what we put in there.
But we still know what the processor's legal to do and what it's not legal to do, and we still know what data is tainted and what's not. So even though the processor has been told to do something different, you know, you told somebody to walk diagonally across the street, you know you had to walk 2 lanes. We say that happening, we're going to stop that. So yes, it's the kind of operational control that we can do, regardless of why it's happening. The fact is, it is happening, and we will stop it. Okay. So that's the kind of an idea of a sentry. Think of Fort Knox. We're the guys out in the sentry that are guarding the perimeter and not allowing anybody access to the valuable assets inside. Well, ARM's solution is a software solution. It's called Trust Zone. Okay, and they do have crypto.
Doesn't work right.
Well, you know, just do a Google search for Trust Zone bugs, and you'll get a litany of them. My favorite one was that last year the headline was "Clock Screw definitively takes the trust out of Trust Zone." And you know, it's like, okay, so now I've made it harder to get at it, but you're not guaranteed it, right? And so, and ARM's not a semiconductor company; they're a supplier to the semiconductors. And
but as I said, they've made a big noise about, you know, leading the charge on this, and they're obviously not. So.
Remember, they're a processor company. They're not a software company, and so they're offering a software product. And I'm sure it's. You know,
you're being very diplomatic.
I'm trying.
And I think we'll leave it up there. So Dan, thank you for your time.
Sure.
Okay, and that was Dan Ganousis from Dover Microsystems. It's an interesting world we're entering into. Somebody is finally paying attention to hardware. This has been Lou Covey with Full Washer Media. Nice talking to you.